Neuroscientists cannot tell us how we acquire consciousness. They explain how we function through electrical signals and cellular signals in the brain. I don't understand how consciousness can derive feelings and emotions from electrical signals. The thing that philosophers call phenomenal consciousness, qualia. Therefore, I'm genuinely curious. As a scientist and also a technology researcher, I really want to know how it might be possible to give a computer consciousness through programming, and the more I think about it, the more I feel that this is impossible, because physics cannot tell us how to convert electrical signals or units of information in a computer, bits, into feelings and emotions. So the core question is, what are feelings and emotions? How do we experience life? I want to know what consciousness is. I was just getting some water. Suddenly from my chest burst forth a beam of shimmering light. A radiant energy. It was love. But this feeling of love was tens of thousands, 50,000 times stronger than anything I've ever experienced. It came from me. And my consciousness was inside that energy beam. And it was love, joy, and peace. I had never felt that kind of peace before. I had always been searching, wandering everywhere, but never found happiness in those places. Yet this was home. This was me. I was that. I was this, not that. This came from within me. And then this energy flooded everything in this sparkling white light, and my consciousness was within that light. Now, who do you think said these words? A novelist? A preacher? A madman? Absolutely not. If you knew who actually said these words, you'd be very, very surprised. So on the journey to understand what consciousness truly is, did this scientist find the answer? And what exactly was that answer? Today, let's explore a profoundly deep and mysterious topic: the origin of consciousness. Regarding the subject of consciousness, we have touched on it from various perspectives in previous content. We usually explore human consciousness through belief systems or religion. While scientists take a completely different path, they often place consciousness within the domain of neuroscience for research. However, recently, an American physicist has publicly criticized modern science. He said that there is actually a major misunderstanding at play. Therefore, no matter how much research is done, it will never lead to a true answer. For example, scientists often use mathematics to explain consciousness. But according to him, mathematical equations are created by consciousness. It is consciousness that gave birth to mathematics, not the other way around. So basically, we cannot use mathematics to explain consciousness. Another example. Nowadays, people hope to explain consciousness and free will through the lens of materialism. But how can something that lacks consciousness and free will possibly explain consciousness and free will? Put simply, a lesser mind cannot explain a greater mind. Of course, scientific materialism would disagree with this idea. In the words of this physicist, it's because science is equated with authority. If a scientist understands an equation, it implies he knows more than others. It's a symbol of power. It's clear that this physicist is also very courageous. To say such things means facing the real risk of being ostracized by the academic community. So, who is this bold figure who dares to speak such truths? It is none other than the renowned physicist, Federico Faggin. Some people might find this name unfamiliar, but what he designed is something everyone has definitely used before. Every day we swipe our smartphones, glide across touchpads, and tap on touchscreens like those on iPads. All thanks to the company founded by Federico Faggin, which first brought these innovations to market. It was Faggin who led a team of engineers to realize the overall product concept. Faggin himself is not only a physicist, but also an engineer, an inventor, and a businessman. He has served as CEO of multiple tech companies, and was the designer of the world's first commercial microprocessor for Intel, the Intel 4004. He later led the development of Intel 808.080 and authored the book Silicon Valley, A Life in a Tech World. In fact, in 2003-2010, the United States government awarded him the National Medal of Technology and Innovation, the highest honor in the field of technology. This further proves his outstanding contributions to the science and technology community, and Faggin shared that. Initially, like many other scientists, he also wanted to grasp power in his hands. And, in order to master this reality, he tended to lean toward the certainty of the physical world. However, in a moment of chance, he became enlightened, as if it had been destined to be revealed to him. In a flash, he realized, if not for that experience, he might never have found the answer. The time goes back to 1990, and by then he had already achieved great success. Although work kept him busy to the point of exhaustion, he remained energetic and proactive at the company. During that year's Christmas holiday, he finally got the chance to unwind with a trip to Lake Tahoe. Lake Tahoe is a famous resort area, with tall mountains and stunning lakes, a perfect spot for skiing. This trip should have brought him joy, a great opportunity to relax. Yet for some reason, he couldn't feel happy inside. And Faggin suddenly realized he had always been doing things externally. When he shifted his attention inward, he discovered an indescribable sense of emptiness and sorrow within. Faggin sank deep into thought, even though he had everything people believed to be the key to happiness. For example, a complete family, a healthy body, wealth, and fame. Yet he still felt deeply sad. For a long time, he even deliberately refused to admit it. He realized there was some deep place within his being that was crying out. And Faggin felt that this deep emotion might somehow be connected to human consciousness. He began to want to understand what consciousness really is. Not to contribute to science, or for fame, or fortune, but simply to seek clarity. One night during that vacation, he got up to get a glass of water because he was very thirsty. But when he returned to bed and was about to sleep, suddenly, a powerful energy, like a fountain, burst out from his chest. That energy looked like a stream of light, and once it erupted, it exploded, scattering into sparkling stars that fell down. In that moment, Faggin saw that everything in this world was made up of those very stars. His entire body was heating up. Every cell in his body seemed to be resonating with this energy. If you found this content helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe to support our channel. Faggin also felt joy and peace. It was like the feeling of finally coming home. What exactly was this energy, beyond love? He couldn't find any other words to describe it. Yet the power of this love was stronger than any form of love he had ever known. Tens of thousands of times over. It was a kind of unconditional love. And Faggin was stunned, wondering why such immense love would suddenly emerge from within his own body. Even more strangely, he discovered a mysterious phenomenon, that his consciousness was both inside his body and also outside of it. In that instant, he understood. He was both the observer and the observed, Faggin said. And now I am observing myself. This energy, this love, is there. So is joy and peace. And then a thought emerged. Oh, a thought. But I already knew what the thought was trying to express. The thought was, Wow, everything begins from here. But those were symbols. Before the thought even formed, the understanding was already there. And then the experience came to an end. My body was vibrating, as if every cell within me was resonating with the experience. So, the body, the soul, the emotions, were all connected to this, experiencing it as a whole. And I was the one using my own perspective to observe myself. According to Faggin's observation, each of us is a field. We are simultaneously the observer, the observed, and the actor. This field does not exist within time and space. On the contrary, time and space exist within this field. What does that mean? Let's begin with an atom. It is a particle. We often imagine it as a tiny sphere. And today, some physicists still believe this. But Faggin disagrees. He said, "Physicists think they have seen particles, but in fact they haven't. What they're seeing is the result of a particle's field being magnified countless times. Because according to quantum physics, particles are not objects, but rather a state of the field. They cannot be separated from that field. Just like we cannot separate a wave from the ocean." We know that the existence of a particle does not disappear. But why can electrons in the form of particles appear and then vanish? The truth is, it's due to the effect of the field. In other words, when scientists regard particles only as spherical entities to study, then no matter how much they study, they still won't understand them. Currently, many scientists view the functioning of the human body and its cells as mechanisms, but in reality, they are not. This is also the reason why, to this day, we still have no way to truly understand what life or living beings actually are. We must recognize that the human physical body is made up of cells, and cells are composed of particles. If the particles themselves are just states of a field, then doesn't this prove that the human body and its cells also carry a field? Each cell in the body is a part of the whole. Each cell also carries the complete genetic code of the egg, capable of generating the entire living being. Therefore, every part of our body holds complete latent information, and thus, it can also use this hidden information to change itself. Faggin said, "This is exactly why the phenomenon of epigenetic inheritance occurs. People usually believe that DNA, which is considered the blueprint of human life, is very stable and hardly changes throughout a person's lifetime. However, scientists today have discovered that DNA undergoes very slight changes due to environmental factors. This is known as epigenetic inheritance. Take organ transplants as an example. Around the world, there have been cases where patients, after receiving donated organs, began to experience changes in personality and preferences. And, what's more, these traits closely resemble those of the donors, as if they had inherited certain characteristics from the organ donor. So, according to Faggin, each cell is a part of the whole, and within it exists the complete information of the totality. This clearly explains why such strange and extraordinary phenomena appear. From another perspective, similar patterns can also manifest across different levels. Just like we humans are a field, and this field is part of a greater whole. While also containing information of that whole, every object in nature can be seen as a miniature replica of the total. Just like each branch of a tree, from the trunk to the limbs to the leaf veins, they all grow in remarkably similar ways, right? And based on Faggin's explanation, each of our cells is actually connected to our entire body through its own quantum field. Therefore, we are part of a larger collective consciousness. In other words, humans are merely holographic projections. Faggin's theory of consciousness introduces two important concepts: classical and quantum mechanical. Here, we'll briefly explain. In general physics, classical mechanics refers to environmental phenomena we are familiar with, which we can understand as surface-level matter, while quantum mechanics lies hidden beneath the surface, representing things of the mind or layers of consciousness. For example, cells. Modern scientific materialism views them as classical matter. Thus, the human body is seen as nothing more than a machine. But Faggin believes cells are quantum mechanical matter, and that makes a huge difference. We know that computers use electronic components to store and process information. These components usually operate in just two states, on or off. That's why computers use the binary system to represent data. Each binary digit is called a bit, the smallest unit of memory. A like and a subscribe. From you means the world to us, and keeps us going with more meaningful content. A bit is used to represent a state of either 0 or 1. However, when we do not set a specific measurement orientation, we find that regardless of the direction of a quantum bit, it exists in both 0 and 1 simultaneously. But once we set a direction for measurement, we receive only one of the two results, either 0 or 1 along that direction. This outcome is determined by consciousness and free will within the quantum field. This concept is similar to the double-slit experiment we discussed earlier. When unobserved, the system exists in a superposition. But the moment we attempt to observe the quantum state, it collapses into either 0 or 1. We know that information in physics is inherently meaningless. So, if we begin our research from this premise, the conclusion we reach is a purposeless and meaningless universe. According to Faggin's perspective, modern science is focused on exploring the external world. But all meaningful experiences like consciousness, free will, and other such themes are deeply tied to the inner world within. Humans tend to separate the two, but in reality, there is no clear boundary between them. Looking a bit deeper, reality is not made up of separate parts, but is instead a unified whole. Quantum physics has shown that the universe is a whole, and everything that turns inward within it is interconnected, with human beings being quantum fields themselves. The reason we can perceive and understand meaningful things is because meaning and perception exist within the scope of our field. This is quantum information. It does not exist on the surface level of information, which is why others cannot perceive it, nor can it be calculated through mathematics or equations. Today, the primary purpose of human existence seems to be competition, similar to the theory of survival through adaptation. During evolution, only the organisms most suited to their environment can survive, while the rest are eliminated. But ever since Faggin's awakening, he has completely disagreed with this view, because he has experienced being both the observer and the observed. He believes that once a person truly understands who they are, they will realize that humans do not survive through competition with others. Working together is the only true way forward. Yet this theory of survival through adaptation is actually what prevents people from cooperating and evolving together. Competition only occurs within yourself, to compete with your past self, to be better today than you were yesterday, not to compete with others. Faggin also said that a quantum field, besides having consciousness and free will, must also understand itself. In those moments when each of us wants to truly understand who we are, we must understand completely. We cannot just understand a part of ourselves. we must understand the totality of who we are. And the very moment he understood that totality, he created a unique part of himself within that whole. This is the process of life regeneration. It's not about replication, but when an individual sees or comprehends the entirety of the whole, another individual is born, and that too is part of the whole. In addition, as the founder of a tech company, Faggin also spoke about AI. He understands very well how computers work, but he doesn't oppose the current development of AI. He believes that AI helping humans complete tasks more efficiently is a good thing. But he is convinced that AI will never surpass human beings, because creativity does not follow algorithms. So even when AI offers a great idea, it still requires human consciousness and thinking to judge whether that idea is good or bad. So even though science today is highly advanced, it is still very limited if we ignore the inner dimensions. What Faggin is doing is combining science with spirituality, integrating science with the inner world. For example, merging it with things like meaning, experience, consciousness, and free will. He predicts that a new kind of mathematics will eventually be developed, one that can incorporate quantum information such as phenomenal consciousness. Of course, Faggin says, physics can only explain phenomenal consciousness. That is a doorway into the inner world. But once it exceeds the boundaries of individual perception, it can no longer be explained by modern physics. That belongs to the inner realm, which includes meaning. According to Faggin, the universe has three main attributes: dynamic, holistic, and qualitative. And quality is what lies deep within. So if we only explore the universe externally, we may encounter blind spots. Faggin's theory of consciousness, for those of us outside the scientific field, may seem difficult to grasp, even a bit philosophical. Yet he never actually studied philosophy. His insights came from over a decade of exploring and reflecting on his own internal experiences. And this is the understanding he ultimately arrived at. After all, human beings are products of the universe, and also a part of the cosmic whole. When we explore the inner world, we are simultaneously uncovering a hidden connection between ourselves and the universe. Throughout history, spiritual practitioners and sages have always advised people to turn inward, so as not to be misled by external illusions, and ultimately see the true reality. Faggin, too, began his exploration of the inner self only after experiencing deep inner emptiness and suffering. And now he is reconciled with himself, becoming increasingly joyful, while engaging in the things he feels are truly right and meaningful. Of course, truly understanding the universe, for human beings, remains a very distant goal. However, true spiritual exploration may be the most direct path to getting closer to the universe. To be frank, this is a journey anyone can take. Even though each person's experience may be different, those who reach the end and see the ultimate truth might be the ones who have attained enlightenment as spoken of in religion. And what about you? What are your thoughts on this? We warmly welcome you to share your perspective in the comments section below the video. And that wraps up our sharing for today. If you found this video or any content on our channel truly helpful, please share it with a friend who might be interested too. Thank you all so much. See you next time.